The massive hallway of the Galactic Council stretched before Captain James Walker like a gleaming silver tunnel. His boots made soft tapping sounds against the polished floor as two alien guards escorted him toward the main chamber. The guards' energy rifles hummed softly. The sound reminded him of angry bees trapped in a jar. Walker kept his face neutral, though inside he felt both amused and annoyed. The guards were using weapons that could barely scratch the armor of his ship, yet here they were, acting like they were escorting some dangerous criminal. In a way, he supposed they were right. According to their laws, he was a criminal. The doors to the main chamber opened with a gentle whoosh. Walker found himself facing hundreds of alien representatives, seated in rising tiers, like some grand space opera theater. Their faces, some with tentacles, others with scales, and a few that looked almost human, all showed the same expression: disapproval. High Counselor Smith, one of the few humans on the council, stood at the center podium. Even he looked uncomfortable. Walker noticed how Smith wore the flowing robes popular among the council members instead of a standard human uniform. It seemed fitting somehow. "Captain James Walker," Smith announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You stand accused of operating an illegal warship in Galactic Council space. How do you plead?" Walker cleared his throat. "Not guilty, High Counselor. The Thunder Child is a registered merchant vessel with standard defensive capabilities." A ripple of what sounded like laughter, though it was hard to tell with some species, spread through the chamber. A tall, blue-skinned counselor stood up, his head fins quivering with what Walker recognized as agitation. "Standard." The alien's translator made his voice sound metallic. "Your vessel uses primitive projectile weapons, physical armor plating, and most disturbing of all, a nuclear fusion drive. These technologies were banned by the Galactic Peace Treaty over 3 centuries ago." Walker fought the urge to roll his eyes. "Counselor, with all due respect, those treaties banned advanced weapons of mass destruction. My ship's systems are simple defensive measures, mostly used against pirates and debris." Another counselor, this one looking like a cross between a praying mantis and a jellyfish, raised what might have been an arm. "We have the scan results from your inspection at Centauri Port. Your vessel's main cannon uses chemical explosives to propel metal projectiles at high velocity. This is barbaric." "It's called a railgun," Walker explained patiently, "and it's less barbaric than the plasma weapons that leave ship's crews dying of radiation poisoning." This caused an uproar in the chamber. Walker noticed Smith wincing. Apparently, mentioning the downsides of approved weapons was considered poor form. A hologram appeared in the center of the chamber, showing the Thunder Child in all her glory. Walker felt a surge of pride. She wasn't pretty by council standards. No sleek lines or glowing force fields. The Thunder Child was built for function, not fashion. Her hull was thick armor plating, scored with marks from micro-meteor impacts. Point defense turrets dotted her surface like warts on a toad. The main railgun ran along her spine like an ancient ship's cannon. "Look at this abomination." The blue-skinned counselor pointed at the hologram. "No energy shields, no gravitic drives. It uses chemical thrusters for maneuvering. The entire ship is a museum piece. It belongs in a historical archive, not in active space." Walker took a deep breath. "Those primitive chemical thrusters give us better acceleration than your gravitic drives. That barbaric railgun can hit targets at ranges your plasma weapons can't reach. And that thick armor has saved my crew more times than I can count." "This is precisely the problem," Smith cut in, probably trying to prevent Walker from making things worse. "Captain, humanity agreed to follow Council technology standards when we joined the galactic community. Your ship violates not just the letter of our laws, but their spirit. We've moved beyond such crude applications of force." Walker looked around the chamber, meeting as many alien eyes, or equivalent organs, as he could. "Have we?" Last month, the Thunder Child responded to a distress call from a Council merchant ship. Pirates had disabled their shields with a frequency scanner. One shot. That's all it took because they had no backup defenses. My ship's armor let us get close enough to drive the pirates off. That is not the point, Smith said quickly, but Walker could see his words had caused some murmuring among the council members. The fact remains that your vessel violates 37 different treaty provisions. The penalty for such violations is clear. Walker squared his shoulders. Then maybe the treaties need to be reviewed. Humanity didn't advance by throwing away proven technology just because something fancier came along. We improve, we adapt, we combine old and new. That's our strength. Your strength. The mantis jellyfish counselor's translator crackled with emotion. You speak of strength while clinging to the tools of your species' barbaric past. The Council's technology represents millennia of peaceful development. Peace through strength, Walker replied quietly. The Thunder Child has never started a fight, but she's finished quite a few. Those barbaric weapons have saved hundreds of lives, human and alien. The chamber erupted in argument. Walker stood calmly as dozens of counselors spoke at once, their translators creating a cacophony of overlapping voices. He noticed a very few, nodding thoughtfully at his words. Smith banged a ceremonial staff against the floor, restoring order. Captain Walker, this council appreciates your service record. However, we cannot allow such flagrant violations of established law to continue. You have two options. Either your vessel will be permanently decommissioned and placed in a museum, or it will be destroyed. The choice is yours. Walker felt his jaw tighten. And my crew will be reassigned to proper council vessels, of course, Smith said, as if this was a generous offer. Vessels with approved technology. I'll need time to consider the options, Walker said carefully, and to consult with my crew. Smith nodded. You have 48 standard hours to make your decision. Until then, you are confined to the diplomatic quarter. Dismissed. As the guards led him out, Walker took one last look at the hologram of his ship. The Thunder Child wasn't pretty, but she was tough, reliable, and effective. Like humanity itself, she refused to be bound by arbitrary rules about what was proper or civilized. Walking back through the silver hallway, Walker allowed himself a small smile. He had no intention of letting them turn his ship into a museum piece or a cloud of debris. The council might consider the Thunder Child primitive, but they had yet to learn an important lesson about humanity. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways, and underestimating primitive technology was a dangerous mistake. He just hoped they wouldn't have to learn that lesson the hard way. The emergency alarm yanked Walker from his sleep. He was on his feet before his eyes fully opened, years of training taking over. The diplomatic quarters' soft lighting had shifted to a harsh red glow. Something was very wrong. His room's communication panel crackled to life. Captain Walker, your presence is required in the council chamber immediately. The voice belonged to Smith, and Walker had never heard the usually composed counselor sound so shaken. Walker didn't bother changing out of his simple black uniform. If they were calling him in the middle of the night cycle, ceremony could wait. The halls were chaos, aliens of all species rushing about, their translators creating a storm of overlapping voices filled with fear and confusion. The council chamber looked nothing like it had 12 hours ago. The neat rows of seats were mostly empty. Those counselors who were present huddled around display screens, their faces illuminated by the glow of emergency transmissions. The central hologram showed a star map with angry red markers spreading across it like a virus. What's happening? Walker asked, though he had a pretty good guess. He'd seen invasion patterns before. Smith turned to him, his fancy robes wrinkled as if he'd been sleeping in them. We're under attack. An unknown species has launched simultaneous strikes against our outer colonies. They're not responding to any communication attempts. Walker studied the tactical display. The attack pattern was aggressive but methodical. These weren't pirates or raiders. This was a coordinated military campaign. Casualties. A mantis jellyfish counselor, the same one who had called Walker's weapons barbaric, answered in a shaking voice. Total. They're using some kind of energy weapon we've never seen before. It passes through our shields as if they weren't there. 15 colony stations, just gone. Millions dead. The defense fleet? Walker asked. Smith's face was ash-gray, decimated. Our ships can't get close enough to engage. Their shields fail instantly against these weapons. We've lost contact with 3 battle groups already. Walker watched another red marker appear on the map. The invasion force was moving with terrifying speed. Show me weapon signatures. The blue-skinned counselor, who had mocked the Thunder Child, now worked the controls with trembling fingers. A new display appeared, showing energy readings from the alien weapons. Walker studied them carefully, his mind racing. These readings, he said slowly. They're using some kind of focused particle beam, aren't they? Probably accelerated to near-light speed. Yes. The science officer manning the station looked surprised. How did you know? Because that's exactly the kind of weapon our shields were designed to stop. 300 years ago. Walker couldn't keep the irony from his voice. The Council banned kinetic weapons and physical armor because they were uncivilized. But you kept developing better energy shields. You forgot the basics of physics. A particle beam might pass right through an energy shield, but it'll have a hard time with good old-fashioned metal armor. The chamber went quiet as the implications sank in. Smith was the first to speak. Are you saying? I'm saying the Thunder Child's primitive armor would laugh at these weapons, Walker confirmed. The hull would heat up, sure, but nothing our cooling systems couldn't handle. And our railguns. He smiled grimly. Well, a supersonic tungsten rod doesn't care about how advanced your technology is. Physics is physics. The mantis jellyfish counselor's translator squealed in distress. But we have no ships with such defenses. The treaties. To hell with the treaties, Smith shouted, making everyone jump. We're being slaughtered out there. Captain Walker, could your ship fight these aliens? Walker nodded slowly. The Thunder Child could do more than fight them. We could win. But we'd need help. My ship alone can't be everywhere at once. What kind of help? The blue-skinned counselor asked, his earlier disdain replaced by desperate hope. I need authority to convert merchant ships, Walker said. Human ships, specifically. They all have the basic framework we need. Thick hulls, manual controls, backup systems. We can strip out the fancy council tech and install proper weapons. Give me a week, and I'll have a fleet ready. The counselors exchanged looks. Smith cleared his throat. The council would need to vote to temporarily suspend the treaties. Another emergency signal lit up the display. Another colony gone. More lives lost. To hell with voting. The blue-skinned counselor stood up. I move to grant Captain Walker emergency powers to defend council space by any means necessary. The treaties are suspended until this crisis is resolved. The motion passed in record time. Walker was already moving. I need to get to my ship. And I need access to every human merchant captain in the sector. What are you going to do? Smith called after him. Walker paused at the door. I'm going to teach the Council's civilized races how humanity fought wars before we got too sophisticated for our own good. And then I'm going to show these invaders why some weapons were banned, not because they didn't work, but because they worked too well. Hours later, Walker stood on the Thunder Child's bridge, watching as dozens of human merchant ships docked at the emergency refit stations. The Council's sophisticated shipyards were being hastily converted to install railguns, point defense systems, and additional armor plating. Engineers who had maintained these obsolete systems in secret were now working openly, teaching their craft to a new generation. Status report. Walker called out to his crew. Main railgun charged and ready. Weapons Officer Tom Davis reported. All ammunition stores full. Point defense grid online. Hull temperature nominal. Engineering reports all systems green. Added First Officer Robert Torres. The old girl's ready to remind the galaxy why humanity never fully trusted energy shields. Walker watched as the tactical display tracked the aliens' advance. They were moving confidently, probably expecting the same easy victories they'd achieved so far. They had no idea what was coming. "Send word to all ships," Walker ordered. "We launch in 6 hours. It's time to show the galaxy that sometimes the old ways are the best ways." As his crew rushed to prepare for battle, Walker thought about all the times the Council had looked down on human technology. They had called it primitive, barbaric, uncivilized. But there was nothing civilized about watching millions die because you were too proud to admit that sometimes the simple solution was the right solution. The Thunderchild's engines hummed to life, the primitive nuclear fusion drive powering up with the same reliability it had shown for centuries. On the tactical display, more and more ships showed ready status as they completed their conversions to proper warships. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had never fully embraced the Council's vision of technological progress. Sometimes, you needed to be able to solve a problem by hitting it really, really hard with a very fast piece of metal. Walker smiled. School was in session. Robert Torres stood before the gathered crews of 30 converted merchant ships, trying not to show his amazement at how quickly things had changed. Just days ago, these people had been hauling cargo. Now they were about to become warship crews. "Listen up," he called out to the mixed crowd of humans and aliens. "The next few hours will determine whether you live or die out there. The Thunderchild's crew will teach you everything you need to know about real space combat." The alien crew members looked uncertain. One of them, a blue-skinned engineer, raised his hand. "But we were trained on Council ships, energy weapons, gravitic drives." "Forget everything you know," Torres cut him off. "Those fancy systems won't help you now. We're going back to basics. Lieutenant Davis, show them what real targeting looks like." Davis stepped forward, holding up an old-style manual targeting scope. "This is your new best friend. When the enemy knocks out your computers, and they will, this backup system will keep you fighting. No automation, no AI assistance. Just your eyes, your hands, and good old geometry." The training continued through the night cycle. Walker watched from the command deck as his crew taught the others how to operate physical weapons, maintain mechanical backup systems, and fight without relying on shields. The Council observers looked horrified at first, then increasingly interested as they realized how effective these primitive methods could be. "Captain," one of the Council observers approached him, looking troubled. "These techniques, they're so hands-on. Our crews are used to letting computers handle everything." Walker nodded. "That's the problem. Your ships are too dependent on single systems. One hit to disable your shields, and you're helpless. Our ships can take a beating and keep fighting. When the main systems fail, we switch to backups. When those fail, we got manual controls. We never stop fighting until we're actually dead." The observer made notes on his tablet. "And these projectile weapons, they're so simple." "Simple works," Walker replied. "You can't hack a chunk of metal moving at supersonic speeds. You can't jam it with electronic warfare. Physics is physics." Down in the hangar, Mary Wilson, the Thunderchild's chief engineer, was teaching the converted crews about armor maintenance. She stood next to a massive piece of hull plating, running her hand along its scarred surface. "This isn't just metal," she explained to her wide-eyed audience. "It's layered composite armor. When a beam weapon hits it, the outer layer ablates, turns to vapor. That takes energy away from the beam. Each layer does the same thing. By the time anything gets through, it's too weak to do real damage." One of the alien crew members touched the armor hesitantly. "But it's so heavy. The power needed to move it. That's why we use fusion drives," Wilson grinned. "Sometimes you need raw power more than elegance. Council ships are like dancers, graceful but fragile. Our ships are like boxers, tough, strong, and hard to kill." In the weapons bay, Davis was demonstrating the railgun systems. "These aren't the coil guns your history books talk about," he explained. Modern materials make them far more powerful. Each round is a depleted uranium penetrator with a tungsten carbide cap. When it hits a ship, it doesn't care about shields or armor. It goes straight through, causing massive internal damage. The training continued, hour after hour. Walker moved between the groups, watching as his crew passed on generations of human combat knowledge. They taught the alien crews how to fight without computers, how to keep their ships running with minimal power, and most importantly, how to think like humans. "You have to understand," Walker told a group of captains, "these invaders expect you to follow Council doctrine. They expect you to rely on shields, to retreat when your main weapons fail. We're going to surprise them. When they hit you, you don't run. You get angry. You get closer. You hit back harder." In the mess hall, during a brief break, Torres found Walker staring at the tactical display. The red markers showing enemy positions had spread further, but they were slowing down, probably consolidating their gains. "They're getting cocky," Torres observed. "They think they've got us figured out." Walker smiled grimly. "That's exactly what we want them to think." "How are the crews doing?" "Better than expected." Turns out a lot of them were frustrated with Council restrictions. They're enjoying learning how to really fight. Alarm sounded, and Wilson's voice came over the intercom. "Captain, you need to see this. Engineering now." Walker and Torres hurried to engineering, where they found Wilson standing next to one of the converted merchant ship's engines. She was grinning like a child with a new toy. "Look at this," she pointed to the engine's power curve display. "These merchants have been running their fusion drives at quarter power for years to comply with Council regulations. At full power, they're actually faster than the Thunderchild." Walker whistled softly. "Can the hulls take that kind of acceleration?" "They're overbuilt by Council standards." Wilson nodded. "They all have emergency acceleration compensators too. Not technically legal, but most human captains kept them installed anyway. Smart people. Merchants." "How long until the fleet is ready?" Torres asked. Wilson checked her tablet. 4 more hours for basic training. The weapon installations are done. We can't make them experts, but they'll be able to fight." Walker looked around at the bustling activity in engineering. Council technicians worked alongside human engineers, learning systems that had been forbidden for centuries. On the practice ranges, alien gunners were learning to track targets without computer assistance. In the command centers, captains were studying tactical maneuvers that would have gotten them arrested a week ago. "Send word to all ships," Walker ordered. "Combat drills begin in 1 hour. I want everyone to experience what real combat feels like before we face the enemy." As the crews scrambled to their stations, Walker felt a fierce pride. The Council had tried to make humanity forget its warrior past, to embrace a more civilized way of fighting. But they had never understood. Humanity hadn't kept these old weapons out of stubbornness or tradition. They had kept them because they worked. Now, facing an enemy that made their advanced technology useless, the Council races were learning why humanity had never fully trusted shields and energy weapons. Sometimes, the best way to win a fight was the old way, with thick armor, big guns, and the determination to keep fighting no matter what. The thunder of railgun practice fire echoed through the station. The future of the galaxy might depend on its past, and humanity was ready to teach that lesson. The Thunderchild led the converted fleet through the debris field of what had once been a Council defense station. Walker watched the tactical display as 30 ships moved in perfect formation, their newly installed weapons ready. They looked nothing like proper warships. Their hulls were still marked with merchant company logos and trading permits, but Walker knew they were now more dangerous than any Council battleship. "Enemy fleet detected," Davis reported from his weapons station. 5 capital ships, 20 escorts. Standard attack formation. They haven't spotted us yet." Walker nodded. The debris field was hiding them from the enemy sensors, just as he planned. The aliens had grown overconfident after destroying so many Council ships. They weren't expecting an ambush, and they certainly weren't expecting ships that could fight back. "All ships, battle stations, Walker ordered quietly. "Remember your training. Wait for my signal." The bridge crew worked in silence, broken only by the soft beeping of sensor equipment. Torres watched the enemy fleet's approach on his display. They're following the same pattern as before, moving in to fire their particle beams. "Let them get closer," Walker said. "They're used to fighting at energy weapon range. We want them inside railgun range." Minutes passed. The enemy ships moved closer, their formation perfect, their confidence clear in every movement. They had no reason to be cautious. Every battle so far had been a slaughter. "They're starting their attack run," Davis reported. "Particle beam weapons charging." Walker waited until the enemy fleet was fully committed to their approach. "Now, all ships, execute attack pattern Alpha." The Thunderchild's engines roared to life, pushing the ship out of the debris field at full acceleration. The rest of the fleet followed, emerging from hiding like angry wasps from a broken nest. The enemy ships actually hesitated, clearly surprised by the aggressive move. "Enemy firing particle beams," Torres called out. The tactical display showed dozens of energy weapons firing at once. Walker felt the Thunderchild shudder as the beams hit their armor. Temperature warnings flashed but stayed in the safe zone. Damage report. Hull temperature elevated but within tolerances, Wilson reported from engineering. Armor doing its job. All systems nominal. The enemy ships were already firing their second volley when Walker gave his next order. "All ships, open fire. Show them what real weapons can do." 30 railguns fired as one. The electromagnetic launchers sent depleted uranium rounds screaming through space at a significant fraction of light speed. There was no elegant energy beam, no glowing projectile trail, just invisible death moving too fast to dodge. The effect was devastating. The enemy's energy shields, designed to stop plasma weapons and laser fire, might as well have been tissue paper. The railgun rounds punched through their hulls like they weren't even there. "Direct hits on 3 enemy escorts," Davis reported, his voice tight with satisfaction. 2 completely disabled, 1 breaking formation. The enemy fleet's perfect formation shattered as they tried to deal with an attack unlike anything they'd faced before. Their particle beams continued firing, but the converted merchant ship's armor was holding. "They're trying to retreat to energy weapon range," Torres observed. "They don't understand why their weapons aren't working." Walker smiled grimly. "Pursuit course. All ships, continue firing. Don't let them escape to their preferred range." The battle devolved into chaos, exactly the kind of fight humans excelled at. The enemy ships tried to maintain formation, tried to fight according to their doctrine, but the human fleet didn't play by those rules. Every ship fought independently, using the debris field for cover, firing from unexpected angles. "Enemy flagship is launching fighters," Davis reported. "Perfect. Walker had been waiting for this. Launch our surprise." From the converted cargo bays of the merchant ships came swarms of what looked like garbage, literal space junk that had been collected and modified. But this junk had small maneuvering thrusters and was covered in simple but effective explosives. The enemy fighters, expecting to face energy weapons, flew right into clouds of explosive debris. Their shields did nothing to stop physical objects from impacting their hulls. The space around the battle lit up with secondary explosions as fighter after fighter succumbed to the most basic of weapons, simple kinetic impact. "Enemy fleet is in full retreat," Torres announced. 2 capital ships destroyed, 3 heavily damaged. 11 escorts confirmed destroyed. Rest are withdrawing. Walker watched the tactical display as the enemy fleet broke apart, individual ships jumping to faster-than-light travel in different directions. Their perfectly coordinated attack had turned into a panicked rout. "Casualties?" he asked. 3 of our ships reporting moderate damage," Torres replied. "No losses. Hull temperatures are high across the fleet, but nothing we can't handle." The armor held. Walker looked around his bridge. His crew was tired but triumphant. They had just proven that humanity's obsolete weapons were still deadly effective. But more importantly, they had shown that the Council's reliance on sophisticated technology had become a weakness. "Send word to all ships," he ordered. "Well done. Return to base for repairs and rearmament." This was just the first battle. There will be more. As the fleet regrouped and began the journey home, Walker received a transmission from one of the alien captains who had been trained to use the converted ships. "Captain Walker." The alien's voice was filled with wonder. "I never understood before. We thought your weapons were primitive because they were simple. We were wrong. They are elegant in their simplicity. There is beauty in their effectiveness." Walker smiled. "That's something humanity learned a long time ago. The most elegant solution isn't always the most advanced one. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." The Thunderchild led the fleet home, her armor scared but intact, her railgun still ready to fire. She wasn't pretty by Council standards, but she had proven something important today. In the end, it wasn't about how advanced your technology was. It was about how effectively you used what you had. And humanity, it seemed, had never forgotten how to fight effectively. The Council would have to accept that some lessons were worth remembering, even if they seemed primitive by modern standards. Physics hadn't changed in the centuries since these weapons were banned. And physics, as Walker liked to say, didn't care about politics. The next battle would be even harder. The enemy would adapt, would try to counter these primitive weapons, but that was fine. Humanity was good at adapting too. And now they had a fleet of ships ready to prove that sometimes the best way to advance wasn't to abandon the old ways, but to perfect them. The Council chamber looked very different from the last time Walker had stood there. Gone were the fancy decorations and ceremonial displays. The walls were covered in tactical screens showing fleet movements and battle reports. Council members worked at makeshift command stations, their elegant robes replaced by practical uniforms. 3 months had passed since the first battle, and everything had changed. The Thunderchild's victory had turned the tide of the war, but the fighting was far from over. The enemy had adapted, developing new armor and tactics, but so had humanity. What had started as a desperate defense had turned into a grinding war of attrition, exactly the kind of fight that humanity excelled at. "Captain Walker," Smith called out as Walker entered. The counselor had changed too. He now wore a standard human uniform, and his hands showed the calluses of someone who had learned to operate manual weapons. "The final reports are in from the Orient sector." Walker studied the tactical display. The enemy fleet's advance had not just been stopped, it had been pushed back. The red markers showing enemy-controlled space were shrinking day by day. "How many ships have we converted now?" Walker asked. "Over 300, Smith replied. "Not just human vessels anymore. Other species are volunteering their ships for conversion. They've seen the effectiveness of your methods." A group of alien engineers worked nearby, studying diagrams of railgun systems and armor layouts. They no longer showed any sign of disgust at the primitive technology. Success had a way of changing people's minds. "The enemy tried to copy our weapons," Torres reported, walking up with a tablet. "But they don't understand the principles behind them. They think it's just about throwing metal very fast. They don't get the hundreds of years of refinement that went into these systems." Walker nodded. The enemy had started mounting their own projectile weapons, but they were crude copies that often did more damage to their own ships than their targets. They didn't understand that humanity's primitive weapons were actually highly sophisticated. They just looked simple on the outside. "Status of the Thunderchild?" Walker asked. "Ready for the final push," Torres grinned. "Mary's got the engines running better than ever. The old girls learned some new tricks." The tactical display updated, showing the planned assault on the enemy's main fleet base. It would be the largest battle of the war, over 500 ships on each side. But Walker was confident. His fleet had something the enemy couldn't copy: experience. "The Council has voted," Smith announced suddenly. The chamber went quiet. "All treaties restricting military technology have been permanently revised. We recognize now that we were wrong to ban these weapons. Diversity in military technology, like diversity in nature, makes us stronger. Walker raised an eyebrow. All those centuries of looking down on primitive weapons were a mistake, Smith finished. We became so focused on advancing that we forgot why these technologies were developed in the first place. They worked. They still work. And now, they've saved us. A young alien officer approached Walker, holding out a datapad. Captain, the new ship designs are ready for your approval. Walker looked at the designs and smiled. The new ships combined the best of both worlds. Council energy weapons mounted alongside railguns, shield generators working in concert with physical armor. They weren't pretty, but they were effective. The Council has another announcement, Smith continued. We're creating a new classification of ships, Heritage Class. These vessels will maintain and advance the military technologies that we foolishly try to leave behind, and we want you to command the first Heritage Fleet. Walker looked around the chamber. Aliens and humans worked side by side, learning from each other, combining their knowledge to create something new. This was how progress should work, not by abandoning the past, but by building on it. One condition, Walker said. The Thunder Child remains exactly as she is. No upgrades, no modifications. She stays a living reminder of why we should never forget our roots. Smith nodded. Agreed. She's earned her place in history. Speaking of which, he pressed a button, and the chamber's main hologram changed to show the Thunder Child. But now she bore new markings. Her hull had been decorated with symbols of honor from a dozen different species. The Council races have each awarded her their highest military honors, Smith explained. She's the first ship in history to receive such recognition from every Council member. Walker felt a surge of pride. His primitive warship had changed the galaxy's understanding of military technology. But more importantly, she had taught them all a valuable lesson about progress. Sometimes moving forward meant remembering what worked in the past. The enemy is sending peace envoys, Torres reported, checking his tablet. They're asking for terms. Apparently, they've decided that fighting primitive humans isn't worth the cost. Walker smiled. Send them our terms, but make sure they understand. If they break the peace, we won't hesitate to show them just how effective primitive weapons can be. The Council chamber buzzed with activity as preparations began for the peace negotiations. Walker watched as his crew members taught alien officers about weapon maintenance, tactical doctrine, and the importance of redundant systems. The knowledge that humanity had preserved for centuries was finally being shared openly. You've changed everything, Smith said quietly. Not just our military technology, but how we think about progress. We thought we were so advanced, but we had blinded ourselves to simple truths. Walker thought about all the battles, all the lives saved, because his ship had maintained those obsolete weapons. The most advanced solution isn't always the best solution, he said. Humanity never forgot that, and now neither will the galaxy. As if to emphasize his point, the Thunder Child's image rotated slowly in the hologram. Her scarred armor told the story of dozens of battles, each mark a testament to the effectiveness of primitive technology. She wasn't just a warship anymore. She was a symbol of the importance of remembering where you came from, even as you move forward. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Progress wasn't about abandoning the past. It was about building on it, combining old and new, finding the right tool for each job. Sometimes that meant energy weapons and shields. Sometimes it meant armor and railguns, and sometimes it meant having both. Walker touched the Thunder Child's image one last time before heading to prepare for the peace talks. His banned warship had shocked the world, but more importantly, she had changed it for the better. The future would be built on understanding both the old and the new, and humanity would help lead the way. After all, that's what humans did best. They adapted, they learned, and they never forgot what worked. The galaxy was finally learning to do the same.